Okay, welcome back everybody. We're going to start going over the guided notes for slope. Make sure you have them available and in front of you. I'm going to move through this fairly quickly just because I know you have it right there. So let's go ahead and start. So remember that slope, when we were talking about slope man, we had a positive slope. And that's a positive slope because it goes uphill from left to right. We have a negative slope because it goes downhill from left to right, so that's a negative slope. We have a zero slope because it's completely flat, unlike the line I just drew. And so we put little zeros here because it's completely flat. It doesn't go up or down. And then we have undefined, which is such a steep drop that we can't really define it as anything. We're going to start talking about that numerically. So if we have a positive slope that goes like that, and we have a positive slope that goes almost straight up, one is going to be a lot higher of a number for slope than the other one, right? So let's start talking about that. Okay, so the formula for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You can see that right there. You don't have to write it down because it's right there available to you. What we're going to talk about a little bit is these small numbers. So when we have y with a 2 up top in the top right, this is called, we call it an exponent, but it can also be called a superscript. So if I have the y in the bottom right hand side, this is called a subscript. Superscripts tell us how many times the y is multiplied together. So this is y times y. A subscript tells us which y it is. So if we have a bunch of different points, let's say I have 3, 2, 1, 0, negative 1, 4, and 5, 6. And I say, okay, well, look at the x component of that one. You won't know which part I'm talking about, right? All the points have an x component and a y component, but which x component are we talking about? If I say, okay, well, look at the third x, we would write that as x3. And the third x would be this one right here, right? Because this is my first one, this is my second one, this is my third one. And so my x3 would be equal to negative 1. With our slope formula, we're doing the same thing. Okay, so again, the formula is the second y minus the first y, y2 minus y1, divided by or over, slope is always a fraction. Slope is always a fraction. Slope is always a fraction. If you think of it like that, then you'll always be able to kind of visualize what is going on with your slope graphically. So we've got y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so right below the formula it says, remember, if the 0 is on the top, comma, bottom, comma, and then off to the side there's a bunch of stuff that's written. If the 0 is on the answer is, and this is really goofy because the formatting was off when we tried to make it a PDF. So just keep this in mind. If the 0 is on the top, the answer is, and this is your first blank, if the 0 is on the top, the answer is, well, what's 0 divided by 8? Pause the video, try it on a calculator real quick. 0 divided by 8 is 0. What's 0 divided by 162? It's 0. See, if you can visualize, I want you to take a cup of air, put it in your hand. I want you to take that packet of air and divide it into 4 different packets of air. You still have a packet of air, right? There's still not really anything there. So this is us taking a 0 and dividing it lots of different ways. So if the 0 is on the top, the answer is a 0 slope. What does a 0 slope look like? Well, it looks like something flat, right? So what happens if the 0 is on the bottom? Well, try that on a calculator. Let's see, 8 divided by 0 is What? Usually you get an error. It says divide by 0 error, or it says it can't do it, or there's some other kind of error. Because if you divide by 0, the universe explodes. And let me explain why. So if I have a pen, so we're just going to pretend this is my pen. If I have a pen and I break it into two different pieces, that's 1/2, right? If I break it into lots of tiny pieces, that would be like 1/20th or 1/50th or whatever, right? Depending on how many pieces we have. So how can I divide something? How can I divide this pen into 0 pieces? Well, somebody said, well, you could smash it into particles. That's not going to do it. Now I just have an infinite number of pens. Well, then don't smash it at all. Well, that's dividing it by 1, right? Anything divided by itself is just whole. So I can't divide by 0 because there's no way that we can actually divide something into nothingness, divide something by nothingness. So when you divide by 0, you get that divide by 0 error. What that means numerically, so we've talked about 0. A slope of 0 looks like a flat line. If something is divided by 0, what that says, using our formula for slope, is that there's an up and down movement. There's a y movement of 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And there's no side-to-side movement at all. Does that make sense? So this is what my line is going to look like, because it goes up and down 8, but it doesn't go side to side, so it's straight up and down. Well, what's that called? Well, that's undefined, right? And this is 0. If this is 0 divided by 8, 0 divided by 8, then that means it doesn't go up and down at all, but it goes side to side 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it doesn't go up and down at all. Well, you can see what kind of line that is, right? What's its slope? Well, it's a 0 slope because it's flat. So what we're doing is we're going to be taking these numbers and turning it into something graphical, turning it into something that you can see, that you can visualize. And conversely, what we're going to be doing is we'll take a look at a line and we'll define what its slope is based on what the picture is. So we'll give it a number value based on its picture, or we'll give it a picture based on its number value. Okay, so for those first two blanks on the top half, if the 0 is on the top, the answer is a 0 slope. If the 0 is on the bottom, the answer is an undefined slope, right? Okay, let's try calculating the slope. So for example 1, calculate the slope between -5, -3, and 7, -4. Sorry, I told you I was going to go really quickly through this, and I haven't been. So I'm going to speed it up just a little bit. First thing that I'm going to do, always, 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 if you're labeling your points, always label them. So this is an x part, this is a y part, this is an x part, this is a y part. Well, okay, but I have two x's. How can I differentiate between the two if I'm just using letters? I can say, okay, well, this is my first x. Let me bring my brush size down. This is my first y. This is my second x. This is my second y. And that's where the y2, y1, x2, x1 comes from. I'm differentiating between the letters. So my formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now we can actually fill in those gaps. We can fill in the letters. What's my y2? Well, it's right here. That's -4. Minus, what's my y1? Well, it's right there. It's a -3. It's very, very important that you do -4 minus -3 so that you recognize that there are two negatives right here. Over, what's my x2? My x2 is 7. minus, what's my x1? Well, that's minus 5, because that's right here. So this is why we did evaluating expressions. This is why we did graphing points. This is why we did a lot of the things that we did so that you could understand how to do slope. So now we have actual numbers instead of letters, right? -4 minus a -3, 7 minus a -5, minus a negative. If you subtract a negative, that's the same as adding, yeah? So I can actually rewrite this. -4, oops, -4 plus 3 over 7 plus 5. See what I did there? Two negatives makes a positive. Go to the denominator, two negatives makes a positive. So let's go ahead and actually do it. -4 plus 3 is -1. 7 plus 5 is 12. This is our numerical value for slope. They gave us 2 points. They wanted us to find the slope. We can. It's -1/12. Now, take a minute to think about it. Is that a big number or a small number? It's a small number. What kind of small number is it? Well, if my up and down movement is only 1, so let's say I'm going down 1, but forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that is a very, very slight slope. And I'm doing a bad job of showing that visually, but I'm doing the best with the tools that I have, so you do the best with the tools that you have too. So moving on, let's think about this another way. Why did they give us 2 points to find slope? Well, that's because if you have one dot, you can draw a bunch of different lines through it, right? Let's pretend that I'm actually drawing the lines through it. As many as you want. If I have 2 points, I can only draw one line that connects them both. One straight line that connects them both. And that's it. So in order to figure out which line they want us to measure, we need 2 points so that we have a single line and we can find the slope of it. Sorry, but I digress. So step 1, let's go ahead and do example 1 following the steps. Step 1, let's write our stuff down. Example 2 says -1, 12, and -2, 8. I'm going to label my points. These are x and y components. This is my first x. This is my second x. This is my first y. This is my second y. So we identified the x1, y1, and x2 and y2, right? They're the numbers that are below our letters. So now we can actually write down the formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And now we can actually substitute in the values. What is my y2? Well, what's the number under the y2 label? It's 8. Minus what's my y1? That's 12. Over what's my x2? My x2 is -2. What's my y2? Minus the x1 is -1. All right, let's go ahead and simplify this. So step 2, plug it into the formula. We did that. Step 3, reduce if necessary. So 8 minus 12 is -4. 2 minus a -1 minus a negative is the same as adding. So -2 plus 1 is -1. Can we reduce that? Well, yeah, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Even if you were to put this into a calculator, you would find out that the simplest version of that is a +4. And you could leave it at that. But what I would recommend is that you leave it as a fraction because it's going to make it a lot easier to actually graph your lines if your slope stays as a fraction. So that's example 2. You try and do example 3. And then the second page is just more notes over slope. So try and do example 3. Make sure you keep these notes handy for quizzes and tests, and we will move on.